Behind the glass, faithless tide. Aquariums don't sleep. They exhale. After the last stroller rattles into the parking deck and the final school group empties its pockets of ticket stubs and seashell promises, the building lowers into a slow blue breathing, pumps murmuring through their pipes, skimmers purling like tea kettles that never quite arrive, LEDs washing the tunnels in a midnight that has learned its manners. If you've never stood alone in an ocean tunnel at 1:43 a.m., with a nurse shark sounding the glass like a drummer checking the room, you don't know how a place can ask for honesty without moving a hinge. I'm Rowan, senior aquarist at Harbor Deep. I sign my name under salinity and oxygen and the quiet monogamy of temperature control. My bench is a map of small faiths, a refractometer that punishes wishful thinking, titration kits with patient throats, airline tubing curled like shy commas, zip ties that keep their oaths, silicone that smells like clean beginnings. In a drawer, a dented blue tin that used to hold peppermints and now hoards the aquarium's lost punctuation, a clear hair tie, a bobby pin bent into a question mark, an earring back that dreamed itself important, a flake of glitter that will outlive all of us. None of it valuable, all of it proof that people love to leave a little of themselves where water makes the air soft. My wife, then, was Mara, director of special events. She could make a fundraising dinner bloom out of a loading dock without anyone noticing the forklift. She knew which donors liked oysters and which preferred metaphors about stewardship. She could charm a committee into thinking they'd invented kindness. We met when a chiller panicked on a July afternoon, and the jelly cylinder began sulking into warm soup. I spoke to the system like you do a horse in a narrow doorway. Easy, easy. While Mara reassured a room full of millionaires that warm jellies were intentional, avant-garde, an experience of intimacy. Later, after the HVAC remembered its religion, she found me by the quarantine room, tapped 2 fingers against my wrist like she was checking a pulse that belonged to both of us, and asked if aquarium nights were always this honest. I told her the animals don't gossip. She laughed and said people do. We married under glass, between a wall of moon jellies and a tank of pompano that never sits still for approval. Staff blew bubbles instead of rice. The octopus chose that moment to eclipse herself in her den, and you can't ask for a better blessing. On Thursdays, we kept the building the way thieves keep maps, folded and warm against skin. She'd ping the service bell twice. The night guard would pretend he hadn't heard, and I'd set the lights to dusk and the pumps to whisper. We learned which panes stayed cool against bare backs, and which corners made even the eagle rays look polite. There's a notch at the small of my back from the lip of an acrylic seam where she once pressed me until fingerprints made constellations. There's a comma of a birthmark under her collarbone I could find with my mouth even if the skimmers sang. She'd breathe. Give me 10, meaning minutes, meaning mercy, and I'd give 9 and keep 1 under my tongue for famine. If this sounds like bragging, I'm only laying out the tank. You can't understand the bloom without the chemistry. The first wrongness wasn't lipstick. It was rotifers. A faint freckling of live feed on a filtration grate that hadn't been fed that day. The moon jelly cylinder's light dimmer sat a hair off its habitual angle, only enough for a hand to feel, not for a donor to notice. The tunnel camera for Reef 2 sneezed to static for 19 seconds at 0012 and returned like innocence. In the service corridor, someone had left a glass with a damp ring that smelled like cedar and mint. Our building smells of iodine, thawed krill, damp rubber boots, and the optimism of mops. On the inside of the penguin encounter door, a thumbprint of plum that had learned how to dry itself into secrecy. I wrote the building a merciful story. A catering assistant wandered and fell in love with the jellies. A docent, God bless them, tripped a breaker and called it research. Mint can cling to linen the way forgiveness clings to a lie. The next Thursday returned the times with liturgical obedience. 0012 static, 0016 dimmer off by a breath, 0020 glass ring mint. On my bench, the extra set of keys had migrated left by the width of a wish. The logbook lay open to a page it didn't know. It doesn't turn itself. At home we folded towels, she halves, I thirds. Marriage is geometry with a pulse. Mara leaned her hip into the counter the way sailors trust hull and not sea. Open, she said, not a plea, a clearance. She didn't touch me while she said it. That's how serious things enter a house, hands visible, voice clean. With rules, she added, us first. No harbor staff. No donors. Tell before, not after. Protection always. Our bed is sovereign ground. I wanted to be larger than a tunnel of water. We wrote it on the back of a gala seating chart and signed as if paper could supervise tide. We were brave for 2 weeks. On the 3rd at 10:58 p.m. her text said client tasting ran long. Don't wait up. The reef camera sneezed on cue. The dimmer apologized without meaning it. A glass learned condensation like poetry. I don't set traps in sanctuaries. I tune rooms until they can't lie. We have fluorescein, a harmless dye for tracing leaks that glows under blue like gossip with good lighting. I brushed a whisper under the inside handle of the service door and on the rough knurl of the moon jelly dimmer. I taped a hair-thin strand of monofilament across the staff stair at heel height, not to catch, only to make a hurried stride remember itself. I slid a blank test card under my bench mat so the first hand to lift would crease it like fog learning a name. I turned the oxygen controller's knurled knob a quarter to an irrational angle my fingers recognized in the dark. Rushed hands square the world as if virtue were geometry. 0012 held its breath for 23 seconds. 0016 apologized. 0020 left its ring. The monofilament lay on the second step, coiled politely aside by fingers that treat sabotage as choreography. The test card wore a diagonal bruise. Under my lamp, the fluorescein constellated on the service door handle, and when she came in with fast hair and a smile built for management on the soft skin where her palm met pulse. She looked down, and for a second we were both spectators at our own small crime, the dye painting honesty on her wrist in tender green. Don't paint me the villain, she said. Not pleading, just tired of rooms that feel better when they have enemies. I asked for before, I said. I thought I did, she said. In her grammar, client tasting counted. She had kept tempo. I insisted on melody. He followed with the floating confidence of men who suspect glass is there to flatter them. Jace Hart, the freediver who made donors think gills were a moral choice. He did exhibition swims in the tunnel while an MC told love stories about coral. He smelled like mint gum and a laundry detergent too sure of itself. He didn't look at me. He looked up, the way men do when ceilings have always behaved. We'll go, he told the air, respectful as a cat. We won't perform in here, I said, and held the door because buildings deserve ceremony when asked to carry weight. The latch made a modest consonant. The aquarium exhaled. The groupers turned away like gentlemen in a dressing room. The jellies forgave because forgiveness is their native current. We separated with the ruthless kindness of people who can carry breakables. She took the blazer that teaches glass how to worship, and the calendar where apology and money share a cot. I kept the chipped Harbor Deep mug, and the habit of speaking low to water as if it might learn English. Lawyers moved nouns across a polished table. We signed where names go when they're tired of starring. Work kept my hands from building altars to grievance. A skimmer sulked and I taught it liturgy. An eel decided gravity was optional, and I learned humility under a quarantine lid. Two sea turtles came in with barnacles that had to be convinced their lease was up. We worked together with toothbrushes and patience until Shell gleamed like a second chance. I slept afternoons on my office couch while Pumps told stories through the wall. Kira joined our nights with a toolbox and a braid knotted like rigging. Senior vet tech, knower of sutures, persuader of stubborn ultrasounds, wrath of God when a pump thinks it can murmur itself into an early retirement. She moved through back halls the way current slips around pilings, confident, not cruel. Her hands smelled of betadine and orange hand soap, and the sort of work that doesn't have time to lie. "Which of your children is lying?" she asked without preface, chin toward the moon jealous. "The chiller alarms," I said. "They're flirting." "They want to be wanted," she approved, pressed her palm to the unit like a mother to a fevered brow, and listened with her wrist. The compressor exhaled and remembered its job. We began with verbs that don't bruise. She taught me the particular whine a clogged impeller sings, and how to court a shy turtle back to appetite with warmed greens and nonsense. I taught her the exact purr a reef responds with when you add magnesium at just the speed patience asks for. She left half an orange on my bench. I slid the peel into my pocket and let my stubbornness learn citrus. The first time she touched me, it was my wrist, 1 degree, so my watchman wouldn't scratch the acrylic as I leaned into the tunnel to scrub a reach only octopus arms respect. "There," she murmured, and heat went inventorying my bones with a pen and a question. We are not children. Speed is fear in a lucky dress. The first kiss happened under the catwalk above the turtle tank where the cameras had already learned to obey privacy. Her mouth tasted of orange and coffee, and the warm place that should be reserved for courage and love. She kept her eyes open for a beat, not to check for lenses. I had bullied the angles of everything that matters, just to choose me twice. My palm found that small of her back where a day stores its opinion. She made a sound I put in my pocket for famine. We counted to 10 and used 9. The last second belongs to the water. We wrote rules that felt like respect, not fences. No hands on the public side of glass. Fingerprints are forever and children read fluently. No mouths in the office where the interns keep their bright hope. Ghosts do not merit syllabi. Yes to the service corridor at 2 when the pumps sing a monastery note. Yes to the quarantine room with the task lamp off and the smell of salt and thawed krill deciding to be tender. Yes to the roof under the exhaust plumes when wind turns animal and the city forgets our names. We kept our fingers off master keys like people who have already touched fire. The gala returned because money adores its reflection. Blue forever, the banners lied. Mara arrived in a dress that taught LEDs how to beg. Jace drifted behind with the smile of a man who believes in his own reflection. We nodded like adults who refuse to make a building carry what mouths can carry. Kira wore black because glue hides there and moved a crash cart through the donors like a patient weather system. From the dais, someone misused legacy until it unraveled. Someone else told a story about an orphaned seal as if we hadn't nursed it quiet with bad coffee and good luck. I did my rounds because habit is my chosen god. 0-0, 12 passed without a sneeze. The dimmer sat at its angle like an old aunt who refuses to straighten her hat for anyone. The service door remembered monogamy. In my drawer, the blue tin clicked under my thumb. Inside, the hair tie, the bent bobby pin, the glittered place card corner, a blot with a dried plum smile. Not trophies. Grammar. Quotation marks around a chapter I declined to stage twice. After breakdown, when the last caterer realized mint isn't a personality, and the tubs of ice remembered they were water first, Kira found me in the tunnel with my palm flat against the acrylic, as if glass could teach hands manners. A crescent of wax glowed on her wrist where warmth lives. A ray ghosted overhead like a polite moon. "You look like you forgot to take yourself home," she said. "I'm practicing staying," I told her. "As what?" Her voice was all soft sternness, the way she talks to animals who refuse the obvious kindness. "As a guest," I said, and the word fit like a seat that forgave knees. We climbed to the roof because roofs don't gossip. The city arranged itself into a necklace of good intentions and exit strategies. She pressed me against the parapet with the competence of someone who measures falls and tells gravity to wait its turn. We kissed like people who respect risk and pay their bills. My belt scraped concrete, and we both laughed because slapstick belongs to the liturgy of rooms that have already saved us. We stopped before the moon learned our names. There's a version where I weaponize salt and blue. I splice door holds and camera sneezes and glowing fingerprints into a little film and show it in the tunnel while donors brag about oxygen saturation. That version ends with a building that stops telling me the truth. I walked 2 bodies out of a door. I kept a sanctuary from humiliation. I chose smaller verbs and learned they outlast knives. Winter taught the boilers humility and me patience. The new intern learned the difference between secrecy and discretion. One is a hobby that wants applause, the other a gift. A pop star rented the tunnel to film a music video and tried to tap on the glass like a child. We saved her with a story about shark teeth and respect. Kira taught me that machines obey tone, not threats, and that I go quiet 3 breaths before my temper remembers its mouth. I taught her the shy sigh a coral gives the night before it splits, and how to nap upright on a wet crate without waking angry at your spine. One Thursday, the service door chirped and nobody held it. The reef camera admired water without inventing storms. The dimmer wore its odd angle like jewelry. I laughed into my sleeve. Kira laughed into my collarbone. The tanks pretended not to approve and permitted us ordinary air. If you ever walk the public side in a moment the schedule denies and a voice tells you not to press your hands to the glass because oil is forever, that's me pretending I'm only talking about acrylic. If you see a woman in black rest her cheek against a filtration housing for 1 counted second like prayer, that's Kira telling the room we're its students. You won't see the fluorescein unless walls ask for ghosts, and there isn't a kinder way. You won't see the blue tin unless you already know why punctuation saves lives. I lock the service door and feel the burr under my thumb where 100 stories polished steel honest. I dim the lights in the order the animals prefer so darkness arrives like a language water remembers. The pumps sigh their last consent. Kira steals my final clean minute because she can. I let her because that rule outlived the rest. Tip the night. We walk the back hall with our hands in each other's pockets like we invented warmth. The city outside eats its reflection. Behind the glass, the living decide to trust us until morning. Aquariums don't sleep, they exhale. They forgive slowly and then all at once when you stop making them host scenes they didn't audition for. We don't have 10 anymore. We take the minutes we can carry and leave the rest suspended in the blue where fake moonlight keeps them bright. In the morning, a stranger will step into the tunnel and believe, for a breath, that something inside the water loves them. I will try to be as careful with the living. The blue tin in my drawer will click shut like a sentence refusing to be a period. A semicolon, 2 clauses joined by a breath the tide taught me to take.